My name is Ari Kalaminsky. I'm the founder of DALI Crew, a Microsoft partner. We do a lot of work in Microsoft 365 space, Azure, and whatnot. I've been in corporate tech for 20 years, and back in 2015, I founded DALI Crew. So I'm aging myself there a little bit. I've been doing it for a while. Before we get the show on the road, I want to thank our partners and sponsors for this wonderful event. So thank you, sponsors. Without the sponsors, we would not be here, obviously. Take a look. Please visit the booth. Do everything that you can to get acquainted yourself with the partners. And I'm also supposed to ask you guys to do a quick shout out on social media. Use the hashtags and we'll talk about the event if you will. Okay, so our session is going to be talking about 3 options to start with Microsoft AI. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the structure for the session. It is a 101. If you guys are developers, if you guys have been doing GitHub, Copilot Studio, and so forth, get up. I'm just joking. Stick around. But this is an intro session. We're going to talk about some options. I am going to ask questions. I'm going to express some ideas. You may like them or not, but these are my ideas. I'm going to be pretty direct about these ideas, and we're going to keep it pretty informal. We'll try to run a couple of demos if time permits and whatnot, and get a nice flow going. One thing I'm asking you to do is pay attention to a friend over there, the little Copilot logo. It's going to show up in some of the slides, not all of them. So pay attention to the slides that it does show up in. We'll talk about that a bit later as well. At the end, hopefully we'll have a slightly better understanding of it. Hopefully. All right, so being direct and blunt, we'll start with fear. Okay? We work with multiple clients. Obviously, not all of them are techies. Actually, as a matter of fact, a lot of them are not techies. A lot of them are lines of business. They're your accountants, they're your engineers, lawyers and whatnot. And the one thing that comes up always when I start talking about AI, more so in the past, it's a little better now, but definitely in the last few months, is fear. AI has been getting a bad rap. Skynet, Terminator, HAL, for someone who remembers 2001. So there's a fear. Is it going to harm society? This thing's going to learn, start getting better and better, and soon enough humans, we're gone, right? That's a valid question. I mean, if this thing's learning, which it is, then what happens to society? The second type of question that comes up all the time is my data, my confidential stuff, my salaries, my various contracts, my designs, my patents, all my confidential documents. What happens with that when AI starts running the show? Last but not least, people are worried that AI is going to take their jobs. Again, valid concern. There's a valid concern. If you do something that's pretty repetitive, pretty mundane and so forth, and you're happy with it, maybe in a few years down the road, you won't have a job doing this mundane, repetitive thing. It's a valid concern. But we're going to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about addressing all these issues, all the fear items and whatnot. Next slide is, again, a pretty direct slide. Show of hand, who here trusts Microsoft? Come on, that's not fair, Michael. But look at the room. Nobody. Interesting. Okay, you are being recorded. All right, next question. Who here is using Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams? Oh, so you do trust Microsoft with your data, apparently. Right? Your documents are in OneDrive and SharePoint. Who's running the show there? So, this is important because there's an inherent trust with a partner. It so happens to be Microsoft, and you guys didn't say anything on that when I asked, do you trust Microsoft? It's silence, it's crickets. No, we don't. But all of our confidential data is within the Microsoft cloud.
But who makes the choice?
You make a choice.
No, not necessarily. If you're an employee in a company that uses the product, you're forced to use the product.
Use Google, use Amazon, use something else, use, I don't know, Drop. You have a choice. Use a USB key. You always have a choice. If you use OneDrive because it's convenient, because it's inexpensive and so forth, you make a choice that's relevant for your company. But it's your choice. You don't have to use OneDrive, right? Unless there's something I don't know about, you know? But last I checked, we're using what we're using via choice. Sometimes it's financially driven because OneDrive comes pre-installed on our laptops, but you still have a choice to use something else. Okay? So you inherently make a decision and a choice to trust a partner, and it happens to be, for a lot of people in this room, it happens to be Microsoft. So the question around responsible AI and is AI going to harm society and is AI going to take over the world? Well, we've established that there's a level of trust already. But what we also need to know is that Microsoft has been, you know, committing resources and developers and cycles to work on AI in an ethical and responsible manner. The principles include fairness, transparency, accountability, etc., etc., etc. Okay? It is a very important key element to understand that human oversight is included in everything that we do with regards to responsible AI. If there isn't a human oversight, then we're losing a big piece of the puzzle there. And that's key for anything to do with Microsoft components of AI. By the way, hope you're paying attention to the little logo. It's not in every slide, but it's in some. Okay, so long history of responsible innovation, we know that, right? Focusing on building AI that benefits everyone. That is true to a point. Obviously now they've commercialized AI. You know, Copilot costs $30 a user a month. That's not free, that's not everyone, that's not open. However, things like Copilot for GitHub have been free for a while. You know, you could use components for Azure and so forth that are free. There's Copilot that runs in Windows. You have a choice not to use it, but it comes with Windows, and it's free. So a lot of these components are free for everyone still. And as far as research, Microsoft's been around for 25 years, been around in the AI space, 150 PhDs, working specifically on AI. So we've established a trust. There's a trust between you and Microsoft. And what we're saying is, we're taking that trust one step further. And we're saying, if you are to trust a partner with AI, use a partner that you already have a trust with, which is Microsoft. I'm not a Microsoft employee, FYI, but we are a partner, and pay attention to the little logo. Okay, other thing. We talked about where's my data? Who uses my data? You know, who governs my data? Is my data secure? Are we safe? All that other stuff. Well, a lot of you folks in the room already use Microsoft for your data, so you already trust Microsoft with the data. This trust is extended to AI. Whatever AI systems Microsoft puts in place for Microsoft 365, Copilot, Azure, whatever, all the data elements, all the security principles that are in place already that you trust are automatically applied to AI. Okay, so user privacy is key. All the systems for AI are built with privacy in mind. Okay, so now we dealt with two of the three big fears. The bots are going to take over society. Well, yes, you need to work with a responsible partner. and the bots are gonna take over my data. Well, yes, you need to work with a responsible partner. The third fear, jobs, we'll talk about it in a bit. So, what I wanna do is, I wanna talk about the three options that we have. I think the session is called 3 Practical Ways to Deal with AI, and this is it's exactly what it is. First one is Azure Open AI. It's basically you've probably been to a few sessions today already that talked about how to use Azure Open AI. You get a slice of Azure and you can start coding AI components and then apply them and put them anywhere. Put them in your SharePoint, put them in the Teams, put them anywhere you want. It requires coding, it requires understanding of data modules. It's pretty cool, but there's a level there that you need to understand. Copilot Studio, which is the low code, no code. It's a new way of saying visual interface. So you can create a whole bunch of very cool stuff with Copilot Studio without, you can do a lot without coding. If you want to do really cool stuff, there's a sliver of coding, like a tiny element of coding that you need, but it's a very good option. And last but not least, Microsoft Copilot, which is Copilot for 365. It sits in 365 and it assists you with anything that you need to work on. All right. Show of hands. Who knows who these guys are?
Sex Pistols.
There you go. Anyone else? Seriously, I'm that old? Holy crap. Okay. Okay, these guys pretty much, together with the Ramones, together with a whole bunch of other bands, the Sex Pistols invented punk. They had no rules, they had no limits, they did whatever they want. One of the guys who's now dead murdered his girlfriend. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Like actually literally no rules. These guys were punks, okay? They couldn't play also. They were horrible musicians, right? Sid Vicious, I don't think he could play. He basically learned on the job. Like they were horrible musicians. However, with this no rules, no limits scenario, well, they had some rules, obviously, they couldn't do everything, but I mean, it was very open kind of environment. They created something beautiful. They created punk, which is, today is like the basis of rock and roll. These guys didn't know anything about anything. They didn't have a lifespan plan. They were all supposed to die within a few years from drugs and you know what. But they created something amazing because they had no rules, no limitations whatsoever, which is kind of similar to OpenAI. You can do anything you want with it, okay? The results are gonna be a little rough around the edges. They're not gonna be super polished. You could spend time on polishing it, but whatever you get, as soon as you're done with the coding, it's not gonna be amazing. Like, it's not gonna be pretty. You just have to spend a lot of time on doing it, making it, turning it pretty. And I equate it to punk and the Sex Pistols because there are no limits, or very low limits, okay? The interface kind of looks like that. This is an actual snapshot of one of our Copilot interfaces, the Daliku ones. And I think I made sure to white out all the keys. I think so. So they're all white out. The keys are important in this thing. So Azure OpenAI requires coding, and Azure OpenAI also works with Azure OpenAI Studio, which allows you to interface with things like DALL-E and creates actually quite an incredible AI presence if you know how to use it. So Azure OpenAI allows you to integrate your capabilities into SharePoint, automate routines, tasks, and enhance collaborations in SharePoint and in Teams, and it improves your decision making with AI. Let's jump into a demo. All right. Who here is familiar with SharePoint? Okay, good. Have you seen this a million times? Okay, good. I feel at home. So this is your standard intranet with SharePoint. Some of the things you see here are not out-of-the-box components. They're, they're Daliku components, but a lot of it is out of the box. And here's a document library. Okay? And here's an OpenAI, an Azure OpenAI bot that we built for demo purposes. We have a few clients that actually run that. And this bot, as you can see, is not the prettiest thing out there, but it's extremely functional. Okay? Because its sole job is to sit on top of this document library and talk to you about it. So you don't have to read those documents anymore. You just talk to the bot. Now, it's important to mention that everything we do today with the three ways, the Azure Open AI, the Copilot Studio, and obviously Copilot, whatever interactions I have with this thing, whatever questions I have, all this data never leaves the tenant. It doesn't teach. Microsoft has committed not to teach the LLM, so everything's secure, everything stays here. Unlike if you go to ChatGPT, yeah, ChatGPT can do a pretty nice job summarizing document, but you have to move this document. You see how these documents right now are in my document library and they're not going anywhere, I'm not touching it? If I want ChatGPT or Gemini, which is another great option, if I want them to work on these documents, I have to move these documents. I have to move them to the ChatGPT realm or create some sort of an interface or whatnot. Here I gotta do nothing. I'm not touching these documents. They already have their security in place, the access rights, everything's in place, and I'm doing nothing as far as changing one bit about their security. All I do is apply my AI, this version, which is the Azure Open AI, or Copilot, or whatever on top of it, using the same security limitations provided by Microsoft. Okay, so let's try something. I'm gonna go, how do I book travel? Because somewhere in here, there's a document that talks about how to book travel. So this is, hopefully if it works, unless, okay, so there, it works. So here's what the bot came back with. It goes, well, you go to booking.com or Kayak or whatever, and you do all this other stuff, which is completely irrelevant to my question. Because I don't care about how to book travel with booking.com. I care about how do I book travel for my company within Dali Group. How do I get to New York? How do I do that? What are the procedures? So what we did for this bot, and again, this is something that we could have done, we've done very easily with Azure Open AI. We put in a keyword that tells the bot, when that keyword is inserted into the question, do not answer a generic answer. Do not provide me, the ABCs of the internet. Read those documents, do your job, and give me an answer that's somewhere in here. How to book travel for Dali. There's a document that describes it. It's probably 20 pages long. I don't want to read it. I just want the bot to tell me how to do it. So the keyword STDB bot was chosen by an engineer. And when I talk, I'm not going to name names, when I talk to an engineer and says, can you come up with something friendly? To an engineer, this is friendly. Go figure, right? And I'm going to do the same thing. How do I book travel? STDB bot. Same exact question. But now with the keyword, okay, still not good. Of course, it's a demo. Hold on, let me see if I can come up with, there you go. Let's try this now. I'm putting everything on the line here. Okay, now, there we go. So now, the answers are a lot more specific. And I probably could have used a different example, but now it's actually telling me the right information from the document. Use the travel form. There is a linkable, URL here where if I link to it or if I click on it, it's going to take me to the travel form, and I can start working on my travel request. Obtain approval from your manager, not because it's general information, but because it's in this document. It actually gives me the steps that I have to, instead of reading that 30-page document, it gives me the steps of what I need to do. Okay, and last but not least, very specific, okay, from the document. Same goes for anything else I would ask it. Let's try something else. Steps for a new user. there's probably an onboarding document somewhere in there, I think. And it's gonna summarize it for me, hopefully today. Okay. It timed out. Let's try something else. It's probably, so obviously it's Wi-Fi related or internet related, and it's trying to get to the information that it needs. But again, this one's not organized as nice, but I asked it as a user, what are my first steps? The reply is not as formatted, but it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, and again, refer to these documents for your reply. So a bit crude, but very, you know, like it's very informational. It provides a lot of good information only on these documents without me moving anything, without me changing any access rights and whatnot. Okay? Any questions on this before I continue? Because I'm moving on to the presentation now. Okay. What happened to my presentation?
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, of course. As I'm finding the presentation again, which apparently
So if you ask a question and there is no document, what happens? Does it give you error?
that's a great question. So it will, by default, it will come back and give you an error. That's what it's designed to do right now.
Okay.
So, however, come on, get into prompting. 1 second, let me get to the spot where I was. I don't know why I closed the window. Okay, to answer your question a little better, so by default it's gonna say I cannot find the answer. Like I don't have the data to show you what you want. However, with this solution, with Azure Open AI, with Copilot Studio, which we'll talk in just a second and so forth, you can design, sorry, I don't know who asked the question, but I think it was from somewhere there. You can design the answer. You can actually say, in case of, I don't have the data, say this, or point the user to another data, to another external source of data. Or you could basically ask the bot to ask an additional question. I can't find the information that you have or that you want right now. However, help me understand this a little better and I'll try to do a better job. So there's a lot of elements that you can control about the before and the after with Azure Open AI and with Copilot Studio, which we'll dive into right now. It's entirely within your control, the entire data set, right? The entire flow of the conversation. Okay, I don't know who asked, but thank you for the question. I'm gonna try not to delete the present or remove the presentation right now. Okay, Copilot Studio. Trick question. Who knows who these guys are?
Those talking heads?
No,
No?
no, close, but no. Nobody? These guys are Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk. Okay, again, I'm that old. So, Kraftwerk, back in the 70s, helped invent electronic music. Okay? They had a few hits, Autobahn, they're German, I think, and whatnot. And back in the 70s, before there was an interface, already available interface for electronic music, they came up with, they were part of the wave that invented electronic music. So, their main tool was synthesizers. There's no drums, no drum machines, I think, at the time. There's no guitars, synthesizers. Very new, very defined, very restricted. Unlike punk. Punk was, give me a bunch of guitars, give me some drums, alcohol, and I'm on my way. These guys, they probably had some alcohol too, but there's no drums, there's no guitars. There's just a very, very 70s limited synthesizer. And they created music with it. Look them up, Craftwork, they're real, Spotify, for sure. Now, their creations were very fast. The music they created was, they had almost like a set template to go in, and a lot of the songs kind of sound a little bit, they're very similar because they worked with templates. They kind of maybe not invented, but they created the idea behind, or they worked with the idea of templating music, and they were they're very successful. Now, they didn't have to worry about tidying up after themselves, cleaning up the notes and whatnot. And what they did is, because they had a set template to work with, they plugged themselves into that template and created something wonderful, electronic music. Okay. The analogy here is Microsoft Copilot Studio. The reasons are, you are working with a template. You're going into an interface, a GUI almost, if you will, with a lot of set environments that you can work with and plug yourself into. You cannot just take code and put it anywhere you want. You have to work with these specific environments. As a matter of fact, what I did last night is I created this bot last night at the hotel. It took about a half an hour, maybe a little more. It's a document summarizer. And if anyone here likes Rick and Morty, this is Summer from Rick and Morty, and sometimes she's called Sum Sum. And Rick is this inventor that creates a lot of bots and crazy things, and he created this thing that fetches butter, or passes the butter. So I kind of modeled it after this because its role is to summarize documents from a particular location. Okay? Now, you don't have to just work with documents that you have on, like, in the environment and so forth. You can use data connectors to connect to anything, right? Obviously, documents that are residing within the tenant are very secure, but you can use connectors to establish whatever you want to any type of environment. You could also start working with complex queries, and once you start plugging some code into it as well. So the cat's out of the bag. I mean, you could absolutely add some code to it if you want to create more complex environments. We talked about the specific knowledge repositories. I think it's somewhere in the slide. This is an action to define logic, so you can define logics and get a row from Excel, get the forecast from the weather channel and whatnot, and you have a visual interface for all that, which is pretty cool. Now, last but not least, which is also very, very powerful, when you're done, when your bot's ready, when Doc Sum Sum is ready to go, I should have come up with a different name. Anyways, when Doc Sum Sum is ready to go, you can publish her, it, to almost anything. You could put it in Teams. You could put it in SharePoint. You could put it in your company website. It doesn't have to stay inside. So now you have this interface that reads your internal information, your internal data, the way you want it to read it. So obviously it doesn't go like to any location that you wouldn't want it to go, but if you define a data for it, it reads internal data and it can sit on your external website and start answering questions. Okay? Let's do a quick demo. By the way, the results are far more polished and far more nicer to work with. So here's my Teams, and here's Doc Sum Sum. Are you guys seeing it?
Nicer than what? You said the results are nicer.
Nicer than Azure Open AI bot that was just sitting there and spitting information. You now have a cohesive environment that you work with, right? It's gonna look like a Microsoft Teams app, right? So, the problem is, it's not showing my, hopefully I'm not gonna kill the sliding again. It's not showing the presentation. So, there you go. Okay, so Doc Sum Sum, Teams. This is Teams. right? And it's just basically a bot that sits inside of Teams, and you add it to your Teams, right? I did it yesterday in half an hour, but obviously if you put a different picture in there, it's gonna look like a Teams application that is published in Teams. And Doc Samsung is pointing to a document library within our environment, within SharePoint, and I can ask start doc. By the way, it works on my phone as well. My phone. So if you want to access your own phone through Teams, not a problem. And you know, what I coded is I coded her to say that she passes the butter, but she's not doing that. She's doing something else, and I go, what is your purpose? And she's gonna say, I'm this bot that summarizes document and doing et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's part of my Teams environment. So I can add this bot to a channel. I can add this bot to conversation. So I have conversation with my teammates, and we want the bot to be a part of the conversation, no problem. Okay? I want to involve the bot in conversations about a document or a SOW that we're creating, and I can ask it to go and fetch other SOWs and bring it into the conversation, no problem. Doc Samsung lives in Teams. She's a teenager. And I created it in half an hour yesterday in my hotel room without coding whatsoever. Okay, so very accessible, very easy to use, and a ton of options to make it better. Okay? I'm gonna ask questions on that. And as I go, I'm gonna try to get the presentation going again.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, of course.
Can you talk a little bit about the structure of the file, like, that source or corpus that it's reading off of?
Sure.
Is it just like plain, is it just like Microsoft Word docs, or is it?
So that's a great question. You know what? I'm gonna have some time issues, so I won't be able to show you everything. I want to answer that though, because later I can just show you on my screen. Everything you're seeing right here is our actual data. It's not; these are not screenshots from Microsoft or whatever. These are our actual data. So we're gonna talk about this guy in a sec. I'm not gonna ask if anyone knows who that is though. Okay? But I am gonna ask a question though about that. So to answer your question, with Microsoft Copilot Studio, you can point to a document library, you could point to OneDrive, you could point to an external website, and it's gonna go and scour the it's gonna scan and scour the external website, and then basically it's gonna start answering questions from the available data on the website. All right? So there's a lot of sources that you can use with Copilot. Obviously, if you want a Copilot for internal use, and you have to be very picky about what external website you're using, because you don't control the data that goes on there, right? But the bottom line is it's your decision. You make the decisions around how this thing's, Doc Samsung was gonna do whatever you wanted it to do. Okay? Cool.
How much tokens are you use?
Sorry?
Does it use, is it based on tokens or how does?
So there's a limitation with Copilot Studio. I forget the price, I think it's $200 for using Copilot Studio, and then you have 20,000 tokens, and then you have to pay per use. All right, so there's a limitation, and you're paying for usage, but it's unlike Azure Open AI, where it's completely pay as you go, because over there with Azure Open AI, you're paying for cognitive services, the search and so forth, pay as you go. With Copilot Studio, you pay a one sum, and then if you exceed it, you pay more. But you have one sum to start with. Okay? Okay, Eric, yeah, go ahead, please.
Does it analyze the text data only, or also video and audio?
It does video and audio, but there's a limitation. Another good question. I believe the current limitation, last time I checked with Microsoft Copilot Studio, is 3 megs.
Okay.
It doesn't handle very big files. Azure Open AI can handle anything, but you're gonna pay for it.
Okay.
There's a question here before about anything. There's a very high level limitation to even Azure Open AI, but it's out there. With Copilot Studio, last I checked, it was 3 megs, but I think they're working on it. I think it's gonna become better and better. Okay. we got a time situation, so I'm gonna try to rush through this thing as fast as I can. Thank you for the questions, by the way, bring them on. Okay, so David Bowie, right? Do you guys know what this is specifically? Close. It's Aladdin Sane. It's the cover of Aladdin Sane. Get what I did there? I'm a dad, so dad jokes, AI smart. All right. The reason I chose Aladdin Sane is there's a very good reason for it. So David Bowie was a renovator, a groundbreaker, one of my favorite musicians of all time. During the Aladdin Sane sessions, he started experimenting. Before that, it was 1973. So before that, it was very standard and so forth. I think Ziggy Stardust was before Aladdin Sane, but also standard rock and roll. Aladdin Sane was new. It was like experimentation with jazz. And then later on, he went and did Heroes, which was electronic, right? And Low, which was electronic. So David Bowie is like Copilot in the sense that it's raw. There's not a whole lot of limits to it. You could ask it anything. You could work with Copilot on everything. But at the same time, there's a level of experimentation here. There's some new groundbreaking ideas that Copilot allows you to do. And if we have time, I'll show you an example of Microsoft Copilot and how it provides new light to data that you have where you're looking at Excel sheets, there's pivot tables, you've seen the numbers, you could ask it for its opinion and it comes in and provides that, right? Right now, it's not super accurate, but they're working on it. The fact that it could do it already is pretty cool. So to me, the representation of Bowie is that it does the no rules, no limits, but at the same time, structured, defined, helpful, right? And watch Copilot, not David Bowie, he's gone, but Copilot watches over your work, assists when needed, reference other data. So you can ask it about other data, not just your own data, but other data. And could be somebody before at the booth asked me if Copilot can be modified and customized. The answer is yes. You can modify and customize Microsoft Copilot for 365 with Copilot Studio. You can actually create add-ons for Copilot. What can it do? It could do anything ChatGPT does. Okay, fair enough, because it's ChatGPT based. Big difference, whatever it does on your data. Okay, we covered that, nothing new there. It's all your data, right? You don't have to move anything anywhere. So, I'm gonna try to do a quick demo. Oh, actually, you know what? Instead of the demo, because the demo is gonna take time, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go back. So a few days ago, probably about a week ago, we have Copilot, and I asked Copilot to create a presentation for me. And the slides that it came up with in their entirety, without me touching one thing. By the way, the prompt for Copilot was, hey, Copilot, create a 10-slide presentation. Now we're at 21 slides, but create a 10-slide presentation about yourself. That was the prompt, about yourself. And it came up with a bunch of options, and I followed up and I said, talk about responsible AI. And it came up with this. And then I said, tell me more about Microsoft and their commitment to AI. And it came up with this. Now, when I say it came up with this, it's important to note, I did not touch this slide. I didn't put the image. I didn't do anything. This is a slide from Copilot as is. The only thing I did do, I'm lying, I did one thing, is I added that. So everyone knows that these slides were not created by me. I'm cheating, but not because I'm showing my work. Okay? This slide too. I have no idea what this image is. As a matter of fact, I don't know where it's from. Hopefully it's common rights and it's okay to use it. But Copilot wrote this. Copilot wrote all of it. Okay? So instead of doing a demo, basically you're looking at the demo. Yes, I definitely added a whole bunch of stuff to the presentation, but Copilot, I'm gonna get you in a sec. Copilot freed my time to think about the music analogies, you know, the Bowie, the Kraftwerk and so forth. Like, it gave me time to think about how I wanna point my presentation to, because I didn't have to mess with this, you know, find some boring facts about Microsoft and put a proper image in it. Like, it takes time. I didn't spend any time on that. Yeah, question?
So since you created a presentation without any input from your side, I'm wondering, like, how did you make sure, how can one make sure that information is accurate?
Okay, good question. And that's our right slide for it, okay? Copilot thinks that Microsoft has over 150 PhDs working working on AI, okay? I initially wanted to check that fact. And then I said no. Because maybe someone's gonna ask about fact checking, and I'm gonna say, well, I don't know if this is true, or not. The answer is, if you're working with numbers and you're coming up with critical information, absolutely, without any doubt, always check what it produces.
But does it help you check? Does it give you references where it's extracting the information from?
It does, not in the slides, but when I work with it in Excel, it does point me to the parts of the table where it gets the information from. At one point, we were brave and we created a SOW, an SOW, and again, for time reasons, I'm not gonna show you, but we basically told Copilot, use an existing SOW, a statement of work, and create a new one. Okay, there's a way to do that within Copilot. And it actually did that, and it created a new statement of work that looked identical to the other one, but it asked me, what data do you want to change about it? It didn't ask me, I actually said, change this, the number is, you know, instead of, I don't know, $10 million, make it $10 trillion, because that's how much money we make, right, and so forth, right? Obviously, the data has to come from you, but then it uses existing reference and produces the result without you having to think. So who here did an SOW in their life? Who's doing an SOW right now, as I speak? All right, okay, it's boring, it's tedious, you have to go cut and paste, basically it's contracts, right? It's boring. With Copilot, you tell it just produce one and put the new data into it, and you can actually, to answer your question, instead of it telling you what it referred to, you could tell it, refer to this. Only use that. Okay? More questions before they kick me out of here? Yeah.
Does Copilot only work using OpenAI models, or can you configure it to use other models too?
Last time I checked, it was OpenAI. I think Gemini is a competition. I don't know about maybe Meta, because there's a partnership.
Because Azure offers other models through its like cloud service, right? You can use other models.
So I think Copilot per se, Copilot for 365, you can control the models. Copilot Studio, I think there's a choice there, but I only saw OpenAI. I'm not sure about the future. Azure Open AI, there's a lot more choice, like we talked about choice and so forth. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up real soon. Future of AI. So look, I'm pretty sure Copilot wrote this slide as well, and I forgot to add a logo because this doesn't look like something I would do. Okay. Look, it's nice. I mean, that's a nice structure. By the way, the designer that comes with Azure, with Microsoft Copilot, also puts everything in place so it looks nice and symmetric and so forth, right? So AI, you're not gonna escape it. It's here to stay and so forth. It's gonna, not the potential, it is gonna revolutionize the industry, okay? And ethics, responsible AI is the core and in the forefront of anything to do with AI. So, what I want to talk about is what I started with, fear. Okay? Copilot did not create this slide, I did. Data privacy, choose a good partner. We're at the building of a good partner, but I mean, Google is there. Choose a good partner to work with your data privacy. If you already have an established relationship with a partner, if your documents are already in Google, maybe use them. because they have the inside scoop on stuff. If your documents are in OneDrive and SharePoint, I think it's pretty obvious who you need to use because that's where your stuff is. Okay, so choose a good partner and combat the fear of data security. AI taking over the world, okay, well, maybe, let's talk again in 20 years, I have no idea, right? But again, choose a good partner, a partner that's gonna help you make sure that it's not coming off the rails. And Microsoft has proven itself, and by the way, so does Google and Meta and so forth. They've proved themselves to be a good, responsible partner in that space. Okay? Last but not least, I want to talk about the jobs. Okay? Jobs. Are we going to lose our jobs?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. If you do something, if you do the same thing every day, the whole day, probably, it's not a bad thing, but probably. However, I think that AI brings about some opportunities. There are new opportunities for you. For example, prompt engineer, which I believe there was a session about that earlier today. Okay, prompt engineering is important. And I had many conversations with people, including some of you, about prompt engineering and why it's important. There's a way to talk to the AI that's gonna produce faster results. Okay, I'll give you an example. At the airport, yesterday, okay, I was with my QR code and I asked one of the people that worked there, I asked them, hey, where do I line up for this? And she says, go line up here. And that was my question, where do I line up with this? I stood in line for about 5 minutes. I got to the desk, the reception, and they told me, oh, you're Canadian, you're international. This is only domestic. I wasted 5 minutes because my question was wrong. Instead of where's the lineup for this, I should have asked where's the lineup for flights to the US, right? I would add 3 more words, 4 more words, and save myself 5 minutes. Now do that 20,000 times a day. How much time are you saving? So prompt engineering is important. It's important to train people on how to prompt AI better, and it's also important to, if you work in a company with 5,000 users, 5,000 people and they're lawyers and they're engineers and so forth, and they don't want to be trained on AI because they think AI is like Star Trek, computer, right? It's not. And they don't want to be trained on it. So then the prompt engineer will continuously work with the AI to adapt it to work with the types of questions that it's supposed to encounter from the engineers, from the lawyers. And that's a job. Absolutely, that's a job of the future. Low code, no code programming. If you're creative, you don't know how to code, it's time to get into low code, no code. Copilot Studio, I think it's in free trial. I don't work for Microsoft, but it's a good start. And the bottom line is that it's gonna be all about ideas. I think if you're looking at the next 5 to 10 years, it's all about ideas. And there are 2 things to consider. With AI, Copilot in particular, you're gonna have more time to come up with ideas because you're not gonna have to deal with the nitty-gritty. You don't have to work on designs and come up with facts. You would need to check the facts, but not come up with the facts. So you have more time to create and come up with wonderful new ideas. But also, if you're not necessarily a creator, if you're more of a developer and you work for a company that comes up with ideas, through low code, no code, through the extensions that are available in Copilot, you now have much easier and more accessible ways to create and develop, structures that are going to help the companies do great things, right? So it's not just about the free time; it's about the accessibility and the ease of access to creating things that 10 years ago were impossible. Okay? And that's my time.